We have one more panelist joining us. So welcome everyone who's joined us online as well on Facebook and on YouTube. We have one more person who's going to join us from the Kenya Human Rights Commission. So we'll just give it a minute and then we can begin. So we're waiting for one more panelist. All right, I suggest that we begin and then once Irene, fantastic. Right on time, right on time. I can see Irene Soila trying to connect.
Oh, finally, I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Oh, fantastic. It's good to see you. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to all our panelists and welcome to everyone who's joined us online. Today, we are on Facebook Live, we are on YouTube Live, and we are going to be talking about a topic that is relevant to every living human being. We are going to be talking about gender-based violence. And our umbrella subject will be Silence No More, Confronting Violence Against Women and Young Girls. And don't you worry, we'll also be talking about men and boys, just to preempt that question. So we are live on the European Union in Kenya and Embassy of Denmark's Facebook pages. So if you tune in there, you will find us. We are also on the European Union's YouTube channel. So to our online audiences, please feel free to post your comments, to post your questions on YouTube, on the YouTube comment section, on the Facebook comment section, and we'll do our best to get to your reactions, to get to your comments and questions in this 1 hour that we have. Remember, we are also recording the discussions, so you can be able to listen in later, just in case you miss it at any one point. Like I said, today we are discussing one of the most widespread human rights violations anywhere in the world. It doesn't respect gender, race, background, economic abilities. It does not a respect of any geographies. And right here in Kenya, it affects a huge number of women and girls. We have experts on gender violence in the room, and they'll clue us in on what the statistics look like. How do things look like on the ground? But apart from that, since we've already established that it's a widespread problem, one of the things that we are pleased to announce is that the EU in Kenya and the Embassy of Denmark are jointly launching a new campaign calling to the end of violence. And the campaign is under the hashtag Silence No More, and you'll find that on all the socials of the Embassy of Denmark and the EU as well. And you'll explain more how you can be a part of this movement later. And like I said, we have a distinguished panel before us today to discuss the current situation on gender-based violence, to discuss what actions are needed. So we'll not leave it at the point of lamentations, but we'll go to action. So we'll lament, we'll paint a picture of the problem, and then what can be done and what is already being done. And before we begin, I'm just going to introduce myself again. Or rather introduce myself. My name is Faith Onea. I am a writer, an opinion columnist. I'm a gender activist. And today I'm going to be a moderator in the session. So I will be doing less talking and more listening. And in our panel today, we are very honored to have Her Excellency Henriette Riga, the Ambassador of the European Union to Kenya. Welcome, Madam Ambassador. Can just say hello so you can hear your voice. You can please unmute yourself. Just unmute yourself and say hello. Fantastic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're so happy that you joined us this afternoon on this important topic. And I hope that after our talk, you will be even more inspired and stimulated to get active.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And then we have Halima Zaid. Halima is a program manager, gender and sexual reproductive health and rights at the Embassy of Denmark in Kenya. Halima, do you want to unmute and say hello to the audience, online audience joining us today?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy to be here and hope you'll enjoy our discussions as we look for solutions of ending GBV in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Halima. And in the interest of inclusivity, we'll say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good everything, since you are being joined by a worldwide audience. Thank you for that, Halima. And then we have Irene Soila. Irene Soila today wears the hat of a GBV facilitator from the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Irene, please unmute yourself and say hello.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good everything. My name is Irene Soila, and it's my pleasure to be here today to have a conversation with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Irene. And Alberta Wambua is next. She's the Executive Director at the Gender Violence Recovery Center. Alberta, do you want to say good everything to everyone?
Yes, thank you, Faith. Good everything to everyone. Greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for joining this conversation and looking forward to an engaging and really inspiring conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the only man standing in the room, Michael Omoke, is an artistic director. Artistic director at ACT, New Nordic Voices. And ACT is responsible for a wonderful show that they have produced that is going to be talking about overcoming women challenges, including violence and abuse. He'll tell us more about the show later, but for now, he'll just say hello.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Saying hello from Copenhagen right here. So excited to be part of this and also to learn more. So looking forward for a great discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. So we'll delve right into it. But just in terms of painting a picture, it's 1 in every 3 women will face some form of domestic violence in their lifetime, whether it's sexual violence, whether it's female genital mutilation, which is widely known as FGM, underage marriage. And this pandemic affects not just the person who is sort of like the survivor or the victim of that violence. It affects their families, it affects their friends. So there are a lot of social and economic repercussions to gender-based violence. And that's why we are saying that it's everyone's business. But one of the unfortunate things about gender-based violence is that it thrives in silence. It thrives in silence, it thrives in shadows, it thrives in stigma. And that is why our campaign is rightly called Silenced No More, confronting violence against women and young girls. And that seems to be a good place to start because one of the things that we are marking as from 25th November is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And it will start with 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And this is a global push to raise awareness about this issue, to give voice to this issue, to give credence to the survivors, to the victims. And this year in Kenya, the EU, the European Union, and the Embassy of Denmark have organized this campaign just to encourage discussion about this issue, to bring it from the shadows, to bring it to light and make people confront violence, because it means that even as we are seated in this virtual room right now, one of us or 2 of us have experienced violence. So the campaign, like I said, is called Silenced No More under the hashtag Silence No More. It will go, we have videos, we'll have discussions, and also an award-winning play for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. So let's go right into the discussion, and I'm going to turn to you, Halima. Like I said, Halima is a program manager in charge of gender and sexual reproductive health and rights at the Embassy of Denmark in Kenya. One of the things I'd like us to do is to go very basic and just unpack what it is. When we say gender-based violence, how would you unpack that for us? And why is it universal? Let's start there.
Thank you, Faith. So I'll be very basic today for the sake of our audience. So when we say gender-based violence is any form of violence that is specifically directed to that's specifically directed against an individual or groups because of their gender. So that is how basically we can define gender-based violence. Yeah, and talking about global, gender-based violence is a global issue. It's a global issue because it affects people across different countries, across different socioeconomic backgrounds, across various cultures. And the GBV takes various forms. It takes various forms, including physical, emotional, psychological, sexual and economic abuse, as well as child marriage and female genital mutilation, which I know the ambassador of EU will talk about later during this discussion. However, GBV extent and prevalence varies globally, and I'll take you to Kenya. In Kenya, like many other countries, GBV is a significant concern. It's a significant concern because it affects individuals regardless of their age, their culture, their location, socioeconomical background. And GBV in Kenya encompasses a range. That is one, sexual violence, female genital mutilation, child marriage, and domestic violence. Sorry.
All right. Thank you so much. I think, I don't know whether it was just me or your video was freezing at some point.
Yes, I think it's the network.
Okay.
Sorry,
but please
I think it was the network. So many efforts have been made by different actors, including the government of Kenya, the civil society organizations, and the community to address gender-based violence issues. And in Kenya, there are many laws, there are laws and policies in place to protect survivors of GBV, to protect survivors of GBV and to promote their rights. With this Act, we have the Prohibition of Female Genital Mutilation or Cutting Act, then we have the Protection Against Domestic Violence of Act. Despite this progress in Kenya, despite these efforts, gender-based violence continues to persist in Kenya. Factors such as cultural norms still hinder us from ending gender-based violence. That's very common in Kenya. And then there is the issue of gender inequality. Then there's also the issue of patriarchy that plays a bigger role towards us achieving or ending gender-based violence in Kenya. Then there's also the issues of limited access to limited access to in Kenya. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Halima. I think we have a little bit of network challenges, but we got the gist of that. And you talked about the different forms of gender-based violence that exist in Kenya. And later on, we'll probably ask you to delve a little bit more into what actions the Embassy of Denmark in Kenya is taking to sort of contain this issue, to confront the issue of GBV. So thank you for that, Halima. You might just want to mute, then you'll unmute once I ask you the next question. I'd like to turn to the ambassador. And Halima mentioned you as she was speaking. She spoke about FGM, which is something that you're doing a lot in Kenya about. But just to paint a picture for our audience, we know that the EU and its 27 member states are committed to eradicating violence against women and girls, both within the union and beyond. Like we said, it's a global issue. It's an issue of global concern, and that's why it goes beyond the EU. And that the EU protects women and children from gender-based and domestic violence through legislation and practical measures. So my first question to you is, why was it important for the EU to jointly lead the Silence No More campaign? Why was that important?
Thank you very much for the question. It is very important to raise awareness in the general public. And this cannot be an issue that only women look at. It has to be an all society effort. And that's why we're also trying to use unusual and innovative means to bring the message across, like with a theater play or with films, engagement. And of course, our target audience is young people, because they are the ones who make the change and they are the ones who will determine the future. So together with the Danish embassy, we have embarked on this, and we hope we get through that campaign a lot of awareness beyond the people that you always reach.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. We will unpack a little bit more about the campaign with Halima later. But Halima mentioned FGM. And one of the things that, one of the forms of gender-based violence is FGM. And I think one of the unfortunate things I read about FGM is that sometimes it even moves to infants, you know, like it has become difficult sometimes to detect because it's done even on infants. So I know that is one area of focus that you have. I would like to know from you about the scale of the problem and why it's dangerous for girls and women.
Thank you very much for the question. First of all, FGM is outlawed. It's illegal in Kenya. Has been declared illegal for some years, but as everything, if there's a cultural practice that is embedded in the traditions of the country or some ethnicities, it's very difficult to get this eradicated by law. So you have to work in different ways. And in general, it's basically in the Northeast where the problem is the gravest. And this is also where there's the most poverty. It's all related. And unfortunately, too many families, and including the mothers, think this is a necessary rite of passage for my child. And if I don't do that to my daughter, she will have no chance of getting married. So they think they do something good for their child. And at the same time, there are many girls who want to do it because everybody's doing it, their whole class, their whole group, and then I'm the outsider if I'm not doing it. And I heard also from girls who refuse to be cut, they're being ostracized by their community and their social circles. So it's very difficult to go against the flow if your whole community is going through it in a ritualistic way. So every school holiday, there's a massive push for FGM. So now we're entering the December school holidays, and there are thousands of girls at risk of being cut. And there's this, there are many frontline activists on FGM, including men, who are in the communities trying to convince community leaders, but also governors, religious leaders, elders, to speak up against it. And but they also have their way of seeing what is being prepared. So, for example, if in the shops you see mattresses and other things, then you know that this is for the cutting season. They're advertising the gadgets for the cutting season in the communities. So what happens is the girls are being immobilized for 1 month, basically. They have to stay on the mattress without moving much, because otherwise they, on top of being mutilated, they are risking their life. And the risk for infections is very big, because it's all done in a very unsanitary way. It's a horrible violence, extremely painful. And we have made a movie last year about that, that shows some of the proceedings, and you get sick to your stomach just looking at it. It's really amazing. And I spoke to survivors, and they tell me horrid stories about what that means for their health. Not only the sexual health, but some of them cannot even go to the bathroom without pain. Imagine each time you have to go to the bathroom, you're in intense pain. And I heard that also some girls are being shut and opened repeatedly for childbirth. And I heard of one survivor, she had a baby coming and she was not opened. She was soon shut and she almost died due to that. So, I mean, what is happening there is unspeakable. And thank God last year, President Ruto spoke out publicly against it. We lobbied a lot for this because we heard from the elders that they said, okay, this is illegal, but the new government hasn't spoken out about it, so that means it's allowed. So once the president had spoken, and he also went up country and said it again, then things changed around. And also, we made a massive campaign in the justice sector with the police. So the police was paying attention. So that made a difference last year, but still, hundreds of girls were cut. And what many people don't know is that there's cutting tourism coming into Kenya. So every year, there are plenty of girls being brought to Kenya on the pretext of visiting their grandparents or relatives here. So the parents bring them in a family visit, then they abandon them in Eastley, where they're left to some professional cutters there. And the idea is also to have them married right away afterwards. This is a gross violation of human rights. And I know at least one of our member states' embassies who says we have one person only in the embassy who's only dealing with rescuing girls that have been dumped here to be cut. And those who don't want to be cut, then they're trying to escape and they're being helped. But so many people, since this is hidden in Kenya, in the communities, even in the communities, this is hidden because they are using clandestine houses and in Eastley also. So it's done undercover, it's not public. And most people that I spoke to here in Nairobi, they were completely unaware that this is still being done in Kenya. So what we did is first raise a lot of awareness and alarm bells, and we're doing a project now for 5 million euros for frontline FGM activists to raise that awareness in the communities. We're working with other initiatives to provide safe houses for girls. So FGM is only one part of sexual violence, but I will limit myself to these words for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You have, at least for me, you've painted images of FGM that won't leave my mind in a long, long time. Just bringing it home to the idea of going for a short call is sort of like a very painful experience for someone who's undergone FGM. So thank you for bringing that into the picture. And you've talked about the sort of like the actions that the EU has taken as well in terms of lobbying, in terms of advocacy, legislative changes, safe houses, just to raise the alarm, to raise awareness about the issue. So thank you for that. And I think that really ties in well with our overall theme of silence no more, because you say these things happen in secret, they're shadowed in secrecy, they are, so just speaking out about them really makes a difference. And so I'm going to move to you, Irene. You have the ambassador has touched a bit on the Kenyan government and the amount of lobbying and how the laws have changed. Sort of like there are laws. I think Halima also mentioned that there are laws to protect people against GBV. And maybe the question I'll have for you is if we have laws to protect people against GBV, if people can be prosecuted, people can be jailed for meting out violence against women and girls and even men and boys, why is it not being respected in Kenya? So talk to us about that from your experience. And for those who have just joined us, Irene Soila is a GBV facilitator at the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Please go ahead, Irene.
Thank you so much, Faith. And I take up these from Ambassador. I think you can hear me. I take up this from Ambassador, and I want to confirm her statement that this is the cutting season. I happen to come from a community where FGM is one of the cultural practices that we have over time been very excited to practice because of what it means probably to our community. So really, indeed, this is the cutting season, and it is a season that we really need to speak and to continue advocating a lot on end to violence against women and girls. Kenya is a rich country in terms of laws. So we are not short of laws. What we are short of is implementing the laws and incorporating other mechanisms that will go together with the laws to eradicate violence against women and girls. I would say that there are very many aspects that we need to look at and to consider when we really have to be deliberate about ending violence against women and girls. And just to mention that in aspect of laws, we have all manner of laws that are local, regional, and international. For purposes of time, I may not mention any because they have been mentioned by Halima somewhat. Then we can proceed to just discuss what are these other advocacy issues that we need to look at. So I think a blend of the laws and the advocacy and looking at what are the impediments of seeing to it that women and girls are protected is probably what we need to continue analyzing. I appreciate that GBV evolved. The way it happens and its manifestation keeps evolving as we keep going. And I don't know, because it is a voice that has been that has deep-rooted into our cultures and systems, that we're even getting new strategies of making sure that we continue doing it, just so that we are disregarding the laws that are in place. So, but then what do we need? We need to economically empower our women. Why do we need to economically empower them? It's because an empowered woman or an economically empowered woman is a powerhouse by herself. I don't think when a woman is well empowered, should be there to wait until GBV takes her out or takes her life away. It is oftentimes because of the poverty levels, and women are the most poor. When you look at the poverty index in Kenya, women are the most poor. And it becomes very difficult when you are a woman with a disability from a marginalized community. It even becomes more difficult when you are a woman who is poor from a marginalized community who is probably living in informal settlements. So you can look at the stages at which you become more vulnerable and unpack that and see how best we can be able to support women. I know our laws can take ourselves to, or can be able to be used to prevent or just to take abusers or protect, or arrest the abusers. But however, there are many impediments like would then hinder that to happen. And one of the things is that we need to also help women to break the silence against GBV. Oftentimes, we do not want to speak because of the stigma that is involved in GBV. You realize that you're going to be the talk of the day, talk of your village, and the best you can do is to be silent so that you're not going to be victimized around what is happening to you. Continuous training on women, and even just the society at large. We need to create awareness, continue creating awareness that this is not a cultural belief that then gives women, there are communities that believe when a woman is beaten, for example, wife beating, when a woman is beaten is when she's powerful or when she realizes her space in the society. That is actually just a cultural belief that plays out well. When a woman is married early, the belief is that she's able to get her children and her family together early enough. And so a woman is probably circumcised, and immediately after circumcision, there is a suitor waiting for that woman to take her after. So you deny a woman an opportunity to grow, to become self-aware, and to also just appreciate the life that she was given to live. Immediately after that, she's someone else, under someone else's care and protection, and of course, abuse of all manner. We need to pursue compensation because the laws, even when they are truly safeguarding, or they are truly safeguarding the right of women and girls, we are not exhaustive looking at them to make sure that we compensate. There's dignity. I know for sure we cannot be able to pay when it comes to violation of women. However, there's dignity involved when you create some level of acceptance, or the government and even the abusers and even the systems, our systems appreciate that this is a vice, that a woman must be given back her dignity through compensation, all manner of compensation. It doesn't just have to be monetary. We also need to look at how do we prevent GBV, because the law is clear that we can be able to prevent, but what are the social avenues that are there in our communities to prevent GBV? We need to understand where we are in terms of having them understood, so that we are not just responding, but we are more importantly preventing GBV. Then culture change. How do we make sure that we are changing our society to understand that female genital mutilation, early marriages, and any other forms of sexual violence, economic violations are an impediment to human and women's development, and hence the need to protect. Education definitely will come through for us, but it is a slow process. It is a process that we need to keep it together so that the communities are understanding that we are not just going to create the laws that some of which we do not even believe because we believe our cultures has to supersede our laws, but change the culture to suit the human dignity and human rights that we are looking for.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That is such a wholesome and thorough response to the question. Thank you so much. Doris, empowering women in terms of economic empowerment, culture change, changes in the legislation, that is what will eventually confront the issue of GBV. Thank you so much, Irene, for that experience and introducing a new phrase, the cutting season. It's the cutting season, that all people fighting GBV need to be aware that this is when girls are the most vulnerable because they are home, they are with their parents, and their parents, as the ambassador rightly said, some of the parents are actually the perpetrators of this. All right. So that seems to be a good place to segue into the next bit of the conversation. I'm going to call upon Ms. Alberta Wambua, who is the Executive Director at the Gender Violence Recovery Center. One of the things that I think every panelist in the room agreed on is that it takes everybody to end the vice against gender-based violence against women and girls. And we know that from statistics, at least, we know that women and girls are the most affected. And that doesn't mean that men and boys are not affected. So I'd like to bring that different gender aspect into the conversation and ask you, how important is it to include men and boys in your work? Please take a few minutes to speak about that. And as you're speaking about that as well, you can also tell us what would encourage, I want to say women, girls, men, and boys to report GBV, because our campaign is Silence No More. So how do we get rid of the silence? So please go ahead, Alberta.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you so much. So, male inclusion, gender-based violence, I'd like just to start from what you said and what Halima also introduced earlier, is violence perpetrated to either men or women, either female or male. And a lot of times we think that gender-based violence only speaks to women or girls being violated. So as you rightfully said, it affects both men and women. And it's hence important to include it right from that, because then men also get affected. Through the Accelerate program that's run, supported by the Danida Embassy between January and September this year, there are over 10,082 survivors of gender-based violence just from 13 counties. And 10% of those were men and boys. It's not about the statistics, it's about the effect, of that person to that one survivor of gender-based violence. It's 100%. So it's important, one, to involve men and boys because they're also survivors of gender-based violence. Now, from statistics from the Kenya Demographic Health Survey, from statistics from the Gender Violence Recovery Center and a lot of other players, 90% of the alleged perpetrators of gender-based violence, whether it's perpetrated to a female or male, are men and boys. So that's, again, why then we need to include men and boys into this conversation of gender-based violence. So one, not to have them as alleged perpetrators and also not to have them as survivors. Now, proactively, if we level the playing ground, in terms of gender inequality, it's called opportunities and potential for both male and female. And that addressing historical privileges that favored in our society, favored the men and boys, and also addressing harmful practices like the female genital mutilation, wife inheritance, and a lot of this that was earlier mentioned, then we'll be able to address the human rights issue and will not have gender-based violence. Some of the things why then again it's important to include men and boys in our current society, that's a patriarchal society, are mainly in the decision-making spaces. I'm not going to give examples, but even when you look at the political spaces, we only have 7 female governors out of 47. So who's best to speak for the women and girls who are about 90% of the survivors in this country? It's then, getting women into more of those spaces. And again, there's also this myth we need to demystify, where they think if it's women empowerment, as Irene spoke to, we tend to think that it's taking away from men. It doesn't. It's just like a football game where you need equal number of players to be able to play the game. So that's a bit answers that question. Now, how do we break this silence? How do we say silence no more? How do we encourage reporting of survivors? One, we start with the community, create awareness in the community. We let people know what is gender-based violence. There are communities where it's culturally entrenched and people don't even realize that they're being violated. Give many examples. So creating that awareness. Creating awareness also in the community for people to know this is where I can report to, and these are the reporting mechanisms, and making the services accessible to the survivors. Going back to the community, making sure that there's no stigma, so that when anyone reports, not that Julia and the abuser, that's not the person. I mean, the labeling and all that, and stigmatization, and sometimes even the society, after you report, you're taken away from normalcy, so to say. So, for example, you have a girl who's pregnant, teenage pregnancy, and maybe not able to go back to school. So what happens? That maybe result to unsafe abortion and things like that. So those are the issues we need to address. When you look at the response mechanism, there are helplines now in Kenya. There's a helpline at GVC, the national helplines. So that's how then we encourage reporting. So that then there's a confidential way of survivors getting into service points. The National Police Service, for example, has a helpline too. They have standard operating procedures on gender-based violence and how to make it more comfortable. I know a couple of police stations now that have child protection units, including Kilimani and Kwale and many more, in Diani and many more. So those are ways. When we look at response mechanism, we now have ambulances. When you call some of these helplines, they're able to send ambulances. It's to encourage that reporting and making that experience for the survivor much easier. Again, the connection between the different service points, the referral mechanisms, there are now protocols around that. There are now service points where they tend to get more services into one setting. So earlier you spoke to safe spaces, for example, protection. I know Accelerate is about to set up 13 safe spaces in 13 counties for women and girls. There are places where they are missing. So where do you keep this woman or man or boy or girl, safe to be able to get that support? And I must mention the medical treatment, for example, takes even a year, so to speak, or even more. Talking about affordability. So I know gender-based violence benefits have been incorporated into universal health coverage. So there's some ways to cover for that. I know the National Health Insurance Fund, I think now about to change, also covers some of those aspects. I know there are GVRC centers where I work, but there are also GBVRC centers, that's gender-based violence coverage centers. These are centers that have been opened at the county level to be able to enhance access. There is also enhancement in terms of gender-based violence management for service providers. There's very limited pre-service training. So now there are a lot of trainings on GBV management for clinicians. Interestingly, not just for clinicians, but even teachers are sensitized and trained. How do you make sure then that the children are safe? That's prevention, but how then do we also escalate and enhance reporting? So from different spaces, right, from the police, the local leaders, the chiefs, the different places, just make sure that apart from just the training, there's also addressing of unconscious bias, so that then you're not re-traumatized as a survivor to get that support. So it's about making the whole spectrum from community to service provision, to policies and legislation, as earlier alluded by my colleagues, to make sure that that environment is friendly for the survivor, but also have mitigating measures so that then there's no repetition of the violence, but also prevention of the same. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Alberta, for your insights on what it takes to break the silence. I think you've raised very pertinent issues like accessibility, affordability, reporting services, just having specific desks that deal with that. You've talked about the helplines as well, and we'll get to that later, because I think some people don't know what those numbers are, or where to call, or whether it's free, whether it's not free. So we'll get that as one of your final remarks. We'll ask you to just mention that. Just going quickly to our online audiences, we have a comment from Rachel Mbaka, and she says, thank you for this very important conversations. And then questions to the panelists, and I'd just like you to think about it, and we'll come back to it later. And the question is, are there persisting gaps in how the media covers GBV, and what remedies would they suggest to continuously and sustainably remedy this? And I'm sure that part of breaking the silence is making sure that it's mainstreamed, that the issues are mainstreamed. And one of the ways to mainstream that is to make sure that they are in people's faces, in their TV screens, in their radios, online. So, do we cover it, the issue well enough for people to be aware and to be inspired to make change? And if we don't, as the media, what can be done? I'd like any of the panelists who feels comfortable to take on that later. But for now, I would like to introduce Michael Omoke. What time is it in Denmark right now?
Oh, it's about 3 o'clock. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah,
so we
but
are
it's almost dark
still
already.
around. We can all have a cup of tea time.
Yeah.
So
right.
Michael Omoke is the artistic director at ACT, New Nordic Voices, and ACT is the production house behind For Colored Girls, who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. And Michael, theater, film, and other forms of media play a significant role in shaping the attitudes of people, communities, and the society. And the European Union and Denmark campaign called Silenced No More includes a new production of the classic show For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow is Enough. And it's going it's set for showing this week in Nairobi, and it shows women triumphing over violence and oppression in poetry, music, and song. And this ties in with one of the ambassador's last words, where she said that this global pandemic requires unusual and innovative means to bring messages across, so that we don't just seem like we are shouting in an empty room. Those are the last words are my words, not hers. But I think this theater is one of the innovative and unusual ways of passing this message across. So Michael, my question to you is just to sort of unpack the themes in the play. I know it's not familiar to everybody, even though it's a play that is 50 years old, I believe. Tell us a little bit more about the themes of violence and abuse against women in the play. Very briefly, and then we'll go to the next question. Thank you.
All right, so there's going to be a little bit of a backstory to that. So the thing was with For Colored Girls, we produced it in Denmark in 2019, which premiered in Helsinki during the International Women's Day, and then it went to Stockholm and to Copenhagen. So during that period, I sort of realized, okay, these things are global issues because it had a different resonance in this part of the world, right? And so bringing it to Kenya, and I'm being educated here in this panel about how deep and ingrained it is. And for me, it's like, oh, this is definitely then the perfect production to put out there. So we have For Colored Girls, originally, premiered in the 70s. And you mentioned about 50 years period. It has been, the good thing is that it's a classic. And one thing about classics, they deal with human issues, and humans are pretty much the same. We have an external environment where things have changed, but the very core issues are still the same. So the play, as I've mentioned, it tackles all different, through poetry, through music, and through dance. It's able to communicate these heavy topics. All these topics which we're talking about, they're quite heavy, and this is where you can use cultural diplomacy to speak into the heart. So it basically covers everything we've mentioned about, but it unpacks it through choreography. which is it's a term that the playwright put together, which is choreographed poetry, which is a core poem. So it's 7 girls, with singing and dancing and different poetries that depict different issues that pertains to the whole global themes that we're discussing here. I don't want to give too much to it because people have to come and see it at Signature Theatre on the 25th. We're gonna get started with that because it's a conversation starter. That's what for colored girls. It's a powerhouse for that, right?
Thank you so much, Michael. I think you've really, in a few short seconds, you've really unpacked what it's all about and brought in everything that I would have probably asked. But I'm still going to ask this question: do you really think a play can make a difference in perceptions, in attitudes? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, that question just got me stirred up already. In the beginning, the power of theater, and if you look at through history, of course, they say, and it is partly true, that with the Grecian, the Greek theater, and how it evolved with the Roman theater, and how it evolved to what we have today, and different cultures have always had performing arts, not just theater in the traditional sense. So we had storytelling even in Africa during that time. So the thing is that with cultural products, you're able to have direct communication. They're right there with you. And theater is one of the mediums that still exists as was, which is a complete indicator of its power to engage, its power to provoke thought, its power to sort of have this intellectual discussion and to disseminate and to unpack different things. So theater is a universal tool that has been used during oppressive regimes. And if you look at even back to communism, I had the opportunity to live in Poland sometime, that they used theater a lot during that period. And every sort of, when there's an oppression in every society, and in this case, we're talking about GBV. So that is where you can use art, and that is where artists stir up, because the purpose of theater, just to sort of bring it home, the purpose of theater is to reflect the society, and so that the society can sort of adjust to that. So that is where it comes. That's the power of how it can sort of engage a society.
So the answer is yes, a play can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for that passionate defense of theater as a tool of communication. Thank you so much, Michael. And I know for a fact that it's going to be a star-studded cast, award-winning actors, award-winning director, and we hope that you all come to watch the show. You said the first show would be on the 25th at the Signature.
Right, Signature Theatre on the 25th. And
on the 25th
as well. Right.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And I know that there are a couple of other questions that are just coming through social media. So I'm going to go around the room for final remarks, and I'll have to press you into just 1 minute each to make your final remarks. But first, let me go to Facebook. Okay. So Friends of Kibera Slums. And Friends of Kibera Slums Folks, I think that's the full name, Friends of Kibera Slums Folks, says this is a dialogue as an organization serving where women violence is a common phenomenon every day we can't ignore. We are more than willing to participate, and they have given us their email address. So I think this speaks to what Irene was saying about economic empowerment. In most cases of GBV is when women are not economically empowered, and this is something that Friends of Kibera Slums are saying it's a living reality. And then Nadia Ismail says, I commend the research that Madam Ambassador has done for such a vital cause. It's so eye-opening. So perhaps you'll give us a taste of that in your final remarks and tell us where people who are interested can find this research. So going back to my panel now, we had a comment from Rachel about the media. Is there anyone who wants to tackle that specific question as in their concluding remarks? Is the media doing enough? Alberta. Is that a hand up?
No, it's okay. But I can respond. It was if I can respond.
All right. So I'll just give you a minute to respond to that question, and then we'll go to the ambassador, and then Irene, and then Halima. We'll end it with Michael. Just 1 minute. Final remarks. What do you want people to take away from the conversation? But I'll guide you with a very short question as to what you can say. So Alberta, the media.
Okay. Yes, so I'll respond to the media. I'll say the media and all of us here are not doing enough. If it was enough, there would be no gender-based violence. So one of the gaps that I see that we can address are when the media tells the story, they need to research, add the statistics, bring the reality to it, and also the social background. Something else that needs to be done is to tell the whole story. Sometimes we run for the media, Faith, you in media, I'm not. We run for the sensational and what will sell, yeah? So that also needs to be there. We need to uphold the GBV principles, that's confidentiality, the safety, consider the risks. So at times, for example, you will blur the child's, face and voice, but we show the mother. But I'm known, Alberta is Mama Moxie, so it, or maybe I'm in a school uniform and it has the logo of the school and things like that. So we need to also check on that. We also need to make sure that during the interview, we have consent. Consent is signed, informed consent, who, where, who was present, what is the support. We don't want to tell a story and then re-traumatize, the client or the family and things like that. And finally, the media and a lot of service providers who don't do much is also addressing self-care and re-traumatization. Yes. So that we need to seriously take care of that. I go to my final remarks, or that's it?
Maybe we can let's go around the room and then we'll get back to you. Hopefully we'll have time. So thank you for that summary. Very accurate, very sometimes not very easy to hear when you're on the other side of the media, but that is the only way that we can work together. Like we said, everyone has to be involved. And then I'm going to go back to you, Halima. I'm sorry. I think I was going to go to the ambassador first. Let me go back to the ambassador and then Halima. Your question is more or less related. To the ambassador, we've had so many ideas. We've had painted a picture about the statistics on the ground and what is being done and about what can be done, what should be done. Let's talk about the international community. What do you think the international community can do here in Kenya to end the violence? So just 1 minute to address that, and then we can move on. Thank you. We want to unmute, and it's
sorry.
Yes. So, please go ahead.
Gender-based violence is affecting all countries in the world, all countries, including in the richest countries, in the most developed countries. That's why the EU, together with the UN, has the global EU-UN Spotlight initiative to eliminate gender-based violence. So for the first and historic time, the EU put 500 million euros into that initiative in different countries to eliminate gender-based violence. But then, of course, COVID happened and the numbers were surging to such a level that were really unprecedented. But unfortunately, Kenya is not part of this Spotlight initiative because, believe it or not, other countries are far worse. So what can the international community do in Kenya? First of all, awareness raising. And then is the media doing enough? I think there is already quite a bit on the media. What is very powerful, I saw, is accounts of people who suffered from it. So first-hand accounts, interviews on radio, on television, press interviews, that telling their story is much more credible than reading an article about. Then there was this health survey that was coming out of 2022 Kenya. There was a whole section on gender-based violence. And I use that every time I'm speaking on gender-based violence. What shocked me profoundly is that more than 50% of the women who were asked said, actually, it is justified to beat a woman. They themselves accept that they can be beaten for minor things like burning the food or coming home late. This is so shocking. And this was in the press. This is powerful stuff that people, multipliers, can work with. The other thing that the EU can do and the international community is, of course, bring money into that sector. So those who are the activists can do what they know best to do. And we are always being accused of preaching and imposing our standards on a traditional culture like Kenya. And by empowering those who bring about societal change and support those in need, we can circumvent that accusation. We are only helping a tendency that is already active in the country. And one thing that I found very powerful is also to use the data that are available for societies that empower their women. You unleash double-digit GDP growth. This is the argument that can convince the most conservative parts of the society that holding back women is very bad news for the entire country and the economic development for a country. And what the previous speaker said, it's always the poorest woman that is most affected and cannot help herself because she's in a space where she has no alternative. So as international community, to help those first, give them information in a discreet way. Where are safe houses? Who can help you? How can you go away even if you have no means? So nowadays there are apps available, and we're looking into that to make that available to women in the most remotest areas who normally don't have access to these resources. I rest my case here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those points and for addressing the issues that came from Facebook as well on the issue on media and what the international community can do. And one that stuck with me is to invest in ending the vice. They have to put their money where their, I guess, intentions, I would say mouth, but you talked about preaching. So don't preach it and fail to invest. Yeah. So thank you so much for that. I am aware that we were supposed to end at 5:30, but I hope that the panelists who are with me today, that you can allow for us to go just over a little bit so I can make sure that whatever it is that you came to say has got to be said. So I'd just like you to think about like a very succinct way of saying it, very brief, very punchy way of saying it, so that we try to push it to at least to 5:40 with your permission, of course. So I think I'm going to go to you, Halima. And one of the things I'd like you to do for me in your closing remarks is one, I'd like you to maybe spend half a minute or more speaking about the Silence No More campaign. I know that the Embassy of Denmark has been on the front line of this, and just unpack that a little bit more, what that looks like, and then just sort of like talk to us about the solutions that the embassy is working out on the ground to end GBV. So maybe spend 1.5 minutes doing that, and then we'll move on to Irene, Michael, and then we'll end with you, Alberta.
Thank you, Faith. So I'll start what the Embassy of Denmark is doing to address GBV Kenya. So first, the Embassy of Denmark in Kenya is collaboratively working with local partners on interventions that helps in preventing and responding GBV. And we are working with Population Services Kenya. We are working with Gender Violence Recovery Center and Population Services International in a program known as Accelerate. The embassy has allocated 800 million to support a 5-year intervention that's accelerating the ICPD plus 25 promise. And one of the promises that the program is implementing is ending GBV, ending gender-based violence, ending harmful and traditional practices, and ending child marriage. So the program is being implemented in 13 counties, and within those 13 counties, the program has established 13 gender-based violence recovery centers that uses an integrated approach of both sexual reproductive health and rights and gender-based violence to address GBV, and also to provide capacity building for the health workers, for teachers, for police, and also for some of the local leaders. So that already is a multifaceted approach that enables us to address the issues in a wholesome approach. Then we are also supporting services. I've talked about the strengthening of the gender-based violence recovery centers, and we are currently working towards supporting the establishment and strengthening of 13 shelters, supporting 13 shelters in the 13 counties that Accelerate is working in. Then through advocacy and policy reform, the Embassy of Denmark in Kenya is working with different local organizations, like we are working with FIDA, we are working with GVRC, who are the current chairs of GBV national level. We are also working with IDLO and Uraia to push for some of the policy reforms that are affecting human rights issues and women rights issues. Then when it comes to awareness campaign, and this is where I'm going to talk also about the joint EU and Denmark of Kenya 16 Days Gender Activism campaign of the Silence No More. So we are also supporting awareness campaigns and education. So the Embassy of Denmark supports initiatives to raise awareness about GBV, and one is the one we are talking about today, Silence No More. So the campaign aims at raising awareness about and advocating for an end of gender-based violence globally. And in Kenya, for this play, we will be targeting 3 counties, that is Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa. And in Nairobi, we have a premiere on the 23rd of November. Then we have 25th, where we will have a show for the Silence No More. Then on 24th, we are also creating awareness at the grassroots level, where we will be doing dialogues and sensitization with the local people in the informal settlements of Mukuru. We'll also be partnering with one of the Denmark partners. They are known as Badili Africa. Then on the 29th of November, we will have a show at the University of Nairobi. That's already confirmed. So that is where we'll also have high-level dialogue conversations. We'll also have sensitization, and we'll also have some of our partners, both EU and Denmark of Kenya, providing services on that day for the university students on the 29th. Then in Kisumu, the show there will be a show on the 2nd of December, on the 3rd and the 4th. We will also be targeting young people, women and girls, both in the university and the informal settlements of Nyalenda and Kosao in Kisumu. So those will be happening between 2nd and 4th in Kisumu. Then in Mombasa, we will also be targeting young people, women and girls. The show and conversations of Silence No More will go on the 7th at Swahili Port, on the 8th in the informal settlements of Bangladesh in Mombasa. Then there will be also other informal conversations. Then just more about the campaign. The campaign strives to create a world free from gender-based violence and empowering survivors to speak out and to seek justice. The campaign will aim to create a meaningful and lasting change in how the society addresses and responds to gender-based violence. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So keyword, meaningful and lasting change. That's what I'm taking away from the campaign. Meaningful and lasting change. And it will be under the hashtag Silence No More across all social media platforms. Thank you so much. I'm just going to jump to Michael first, because I think this is a good place to bring in the show again one more time. So we've talked a lot about the power of theater and talking about things that you'd not ordinarily find easy to talk about, giving meaning, giving voice to issues. But for you, what do you hope people will take away at the end of the show? Like when people come to watch the show, the public show on the 25th at the Signature Theater, you said?
Right.
What do you want people to walk away with? So you can just tell us that in 1 minute, and then we'll move to Ivy.
All right. So I'll just say this one. The first time I saw this play, and I was with a friend of mine, a guy friend, and we were like, oh my goodness, is this for real? Is this what is going on? And when we performed it here, we saw people crying, some were laughing also. And what I would like to get out of this is, how do we communicate all these complex themes that have been so described in this platform? How do you communicate that through culture? How do you bring it home? How do you bring it to the hearts of people and not just in their minds? So I hope that we will be able to touch the hearts, and that will create empathy across generations, empathy also to men and women and all of that. So if there's a one word for it, empathy. That's what it is.
Thank you. Empathy. I think one of my friends who watched the show a few years back said the same thing. She was crying throughout, and one man said he couldn't watch it again because it was too emotional. So it's basically what you're saying to everyone is that it's a show that stays with you. So make sure to catch it. And Irene, I'm going to go to you really quickly. I'll just ask that we keep the comments to a minute, if possible. I know there's a lot to say. I know there's a lot of, you have such rich resources. But my quick question to you, and I can't see your video very clearly, but I think let's go on. How can we make women and girls more aware of the... Irene, are you there? I think you've moved a bit.
Yes, I think I don't know what's happening with my laptop. So
okay.
I'm just trying to tweak it, but I'm here, yeah.
Okay. So we spoke a lot about what gets in the way in terms of the constitution, the law being implemented. So how can we make women and girls more aware of their human rights? Awareness is one of the things that I think everyone has talked about here as one of the ways in which we can start ending the vice. So how can women and girls be more aware of their rights?
Thank you.
Do you want to move the camera just a bit?
I don't know what it is that has happened, but I think it's just a problem with the system.
Yeah, as long as you can hear you, it's okay. Yes, please go ahead.
You can
just
see
1
me.
minute. Yes.
I think other than just awareness, I think there needs to inculcate the education on GBV, not just with the current young people, but also in our schools, so that we are growing a society that understands that it is wrong to perpetrate or to perpetuate other people's human rights, and also helping the young people who are today being subjected to these violations, that indeed there are laws that can protect people. And as the Kenya Human Rights Commission, UNDP, Mkeni wa Kenya, and European Union, we are working to bring down or bring to the people the understanding of legal aid frameworks, which have been realized in Kenya. And it is for one reason that most of the time when you are perpetrated or when you are a victim of GBV, you only try to access justice to a point that you understand that the law starts and ends with the police station. but I think also just helping to understand that there are many other frameworks and opportunities available to access justice within the legal framework, and in particular the Legal Aid Act of 2016. So right now, that is what we are doing, to just help them understand what is there and the opportunities available which they can use, and helping them understand that the Legal Aid Act does not necessarily target the economically empowered or economically able people, but the indigent who are poor and marginalized in their own spaces, then expose them to GBV. So we are doing that, and we are trying to make sure that we are targeting especially the informal settlements. And then lastly, there is no there's no action that is enough up until we can be able to say we have stopped or we have been able to combat GBV. So all our efforts are complementing, and we need to keep doing what we do best, and where we can be able to come together to make sure that our voices are louder, then we should do so diligently and willingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for keeping it short and very, very insightful in terms of the legal aid for women who are in informal settlements and who would ordinarily not be able to get this kind of information. So Alberta, it's back to you. You will be our showstopper, so to speak. But as you make your final remarks in 1 minute, I'd like you to, you mentioned here and there about the hotlines and all these things that survivors can have access to. Maybe you could just mention that in your concluding remarks and tell us.
Am I the only one who can't hear?
No, me too.
We've lost space.
I think I could start with the first part as we wait for her. That's okay. So the toll-free lines, there's a national helpline, which is 1195, run by the State Department of Gender and Affirmative Action. We also have a couple of other helplines, and we have one at the Gender Violence Recovery Center, that's 0800-720-565. And the national one is 1195, and there are a couple more by the police and many other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to each member of the panel who made time. I'm sorry, I dropped off for a second there, but it's good that you've shared the solutions and that it's on record, and we'll also share this information within our social media channels. I'd like to thank each of my panelists today. The Ambassador of the European Union to Kenya, thank you very much for your insights, for painting us a real picture and talking to us about actions. Halima Zaid, Program Manager, Gender and Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights at the Embassy of Denmark in Kenya. Thank you for what you're doing to end GBV and for speaking about the campaign. Irene Soila, GBV Facilitator, Kenya Human Rights Commission. Thank you as well, Irene, for giving us the legal and policy framework around it and how women can actually, what can be done to make sure that women know their rights and what they're legally entitled to. And Alberta Wambua as well, thank you for your insights regarding Gender Violence and Recovery Center. We hope to learn more about the Accelerator, you said? Accelerator program? Yes, we hope to learn more about the Accelerate program.
Sponsored by Danida.
Exactly, sponsored by Danida, and we are glad that there's a lot of action, a lot of activities going on to end the vice and to make sure that to end the silence. Silence no more is the name of the campaign. And finally, last but not least, Michael Lomoke, who's an artistic director and is is behind the production of the show called For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. Thank you for making us know why theater counts. and why we must go and watch the show. And thank you for that. And finally, thank you to everyone who's put this together. And just to remind everyone again, the name of the campaign is Silenced No More. And so you can follow this campaign using that hashtag on our Facebook channel. So for Embassy of Denmark, for the EU. And if anyone has missed it, they can access the link. The link will be, the webinar was recorded and anyone can always catch up with it later. And thank you, Halima. You've mentioned where the shows will be, when they will be. So everyone, make sure to catch it. If you're in Nairobi, Kisumu, or Mombasa, make sure to catch the show. There will be some paid performances, but there will also be some free performances, like the one I think that's going to happen at the University of Nairobi. So it's goodbye from Nairobi. Thank you everyone who is online for tuning in, and we'll connect on social media, and let's keep the fight up. Let's keep our spirits up, and let's start the campaign on high gear. So good morning, good evening, good night to everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.